I thought I was lucky when my son arranged for a home caregiver after my hip surgery. Her name was Valerie, and she was warm, attentive, always humming while she cooked. At least, that's how it started. The hospital discharged me in mid-March, the last crusts of winter still clinging to the sidewalks. My right hip ached with every step, and the cane they gave me felt like an enemy instead of a friend. Daniel met me at the door of my own house, keys jangling in his hand like I was a guest. "Mom, you can't be alone right now. I already found someone." Already. The word stung, as though my opinion was a formality, not a necessity. That night she appeared. Valerie. Mid-40s, blonde streaks in her brown hair, an apron folded neatly over her arm. She introduced herself with a smile so wide it almost seemed rehearsed. "Mrs. Hayes, I'm Valerie. I'll be helping you get back on your feet." Her handshake was firm, her nails neat. She smelled faintly of cinnamon and bleach. The first evening went well enough. She heated soup, plumped my pillows, and even sat with me while I struggled through my first careful walk from sofa to kitchen. "One step at a time," she murmured, steadying my elbow. "You'll be dancing again before you know it." I laughed, though I hadn't danced since Richard died 10 years ago. Daniel seemed relieved. "See, Mom? This will be good for you. She'll take the pressure off." I wanted to argue, to remind him I'd raised him, worked as a bookkeeper for 40 years, managed a home alone for a decade, all without a stranger at my elbow. But the ache in my hips silenced me. So I nodded, smiled, and tried not to feel like my independence was slipping through my fingers with every step Valerie steadied. The next morning she was already in my kitchen, coffee brewed, eggs sizzling in the pan, humming some tune I didn't recognize. "Good morning, Mrs. Hayes," she said brightly. I let myself in. Daniel gave me a spare key. I froze.
I swallowed my protest, lowered myself carefully into a chair. She set a plate before me, slid the newspaper closer, poured coffee without asking how I took it. Her efficiency was disarming. "Eat up. Healing takes strength." After breakfast, she tidied my bills scattered on the counter. "So many envelopes. Don't worry. I'll help you sort them later. Can't have you stressing about paperwork." She said it lightly, as if doing me a kindness, but the sight of her hands on my statements made my stomach twist. Numbers have always been mine, my anchor, and I didn't like seeing them in someone else's fingers. That afternoon, she insisted on walking me through stretches. When I faltered, she clucked her tongue softly. "You'll get there. But you need guidance, Mrs. Hayes. Don't be stubborn." Her tone was gentle, but the word, stubborn, landed like a stone. By the end of the day, I was exhausted, not just from the hip pain, but from the invasion of cheer, the constant hum of her presence. When she finally left, closing the door with a breezy, "See you tomorrow, bright and early," I leaned against the wall and exhaled. The silence of the house felt like oxygen. I told myself I was being ungrateful. After all, she cooked, cleaned, helped. She was exactly what Daniel thought I needed. But that night, lying awake in my bed, I stared at the ceiling and whispered into the dark. It's my house, my life, my balance sheet. And I wondered just how much of it I'd be expected to sign away in the name of help. They say control doesn't vanish overnight. It's chipped away, one convenience at a time. That's how Valerie did it. The first shift came on a Tuesday. I had written out a grocery list, neat as always, each item in careful columns. Walking the aisles myself would have been slow, yes, but manageable with my cane and the little patience. When I pulled on my coat, Valerie appeared in a doorway like a watchful hawk. "Where are you going, Mrs. Hayes?" "To the store," I said simply, holding up the list.
She smiled, a gentle shake of her head. Oh, no, you shouldn't. Let me go for you. I'll be quicker, and you can rest your hip. I hesitated. The truth was, walking that much would hurt. But groceries had always been mine. My aisles, my choices, my small rituals. I opened my mouth to decline, but she plucked the paper from my hand with a cheerful, "I'll take care of it." And before I could protest, she was gone. She returned an hour later, arms full of bags. The fridge filled quickly, but not with everything I'd written down. They didn't have your brand of oatmeal, so I picked another, and I got this tea. It's calming, better for you than coffee. I frowned, but I've always had coffee in the mornings. Her smile didn't falter. Change is good, Mrs. Hayes. Trust me. I brewed the tea the next morning out of guilt. It tasted bitter, like surrender. The second shift came with the bills. I had gathered them on the kitchen counter, electric, water, mortgage paperwork, ready to sort. But when I sat down, the envelopes were already opened, stacked neatly in a pile. I went ahead and looked at these, Valerie said, wiping her hands on a dish towel. It's a lot to keep track of. I'll make a spreadsheet to simplify everything. I stared at the pile. I don't need help with my bills. Numbers are what I do. Her expression softened, but her words landed heavy. I know, but Daniel asked me to lighten your load. He's worried you're stressing too much. Stress. That was their favorite word lately. I tried to reclaim the papers, but she kept her hand on them a moment longer than necessary. Not forceful, just insistent. And in that brief hesitation, something in me shifted. A question bloomed in my mind like a weed. What if she doesn't give them back next time? The third shift was more subtle. She began keeping a small notebook in her apron pocket, jotting things down as I spoke. At first, I thought she was taking notes about medications or therapy exercises. But one afternoon when she left it on the counter, curiosity won. I flipped it open. Inside were lines written in neat, slanted script. Mrs. Hayes gets confused in the mornings. She repeats herself when talking about Daniel's childhood. Forgets where she left her glasses. I froze. Yes, I occasionally misplaced things. Who didn't? But to see those harmless slips catalogued like symptoms of decline made my throat close. When she returned, I asked her directly, "Why are you writing about me?" Her eyes widened, innocent. "Oh, it's just for my records, to track your recovery. Nothing serious." But I could still see the words etched in my mind. Confused, forgets, repeats. Words that could be twisted into something much darker if read by the wrong eyes. That night I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the house, every sigh of the furnace sounded like a warning. It wasn't just groceries. It wasn't just bills. It wasn't just a notebook. It was a quiet transfer of power from me to her. And the worst part? I had thanked her for it. I couldn't stop thinking about that notebook. It sat in Valerie's apron pocket every day, like an extra limb, and I imagined each page filling with versions of me that didn't exist. A confused woman, a forgetful woman, a woman on the edge of losing herself. But I wasn't that woman. Not yet. The next morning I tested her. I set my glasses deliberately on the windowsill by the front porch, in plain sight. 10 minutes later, when I pretended to look for them, Valerie chimed in quickly. "You're always misplacing those. Want me to note it for your doctor?" Her hand twitched toward the notebook before I even answered. I smiled tightly. "No need. I know exactly where they are." I walked to the porch and plucked them from the sill, holding her gaze as I slid them on. Her laugh was light, but her eyes flickered. That afternoon, I asked her outright, "May I see what you've been writing about me?" She tilted her head, smile never slipping. "Oh, Mrs. Hayes, it's just boring care notes, medication, blood pressure, things like that. I'd still like to see." Her fingers curled protectively around the apron pocket. "It wouldn't make much sense to you. Lots of abbreviations." I let it go in that moment. But later, when she was folding laundry in the other room, I crept into the kitchen. The notebook was on the counter again, left open this time, as if daring me. The page was dated April 12th. Pacifications showed irritation when asked to rest. Disparate voice during meal preparation. Seems defensive about finances. Patient. I wasn't her patient. I was the woman who owned this house, who paid her. But on the page, I was no longer Linda Hayes. I was a case study, a diagnosis waiting to be written. My hand trembled as I closed the book. She wasn't documenting for my sake. She was building a file that could one day be handed to a doctor or a lawyer or even Daniel. Proof that I was no longer fit to manage my own life. That evening, Daniel dropped by. He kissed my cheek, barely looking up from his phone. "How's Mom doing, Val?" Valerie answered for me, breezy as always. "She's making progress, but she gets a little stubborn sometimes. I've been keeping notes, just in case the doctor needs updates." Daniel nodded approvingly. "Good thinking." And just like that, my son accepted her version of me without question. I felt my throat tighten. "Daniel, I don't need notes. I can speak for myself." He gave me a look I recognized all too well. The one he used when I refused to upgrade my phone, or when I double-checked his math as a teenager. "Mom, it's just precaution. Don't get worked up." Worked up, confused, forgetful. The vocabulary of erasure. That night, after Valerie left, I pulled out my old ledger. Not the one for bills or banking, the one I used when Richard was alive, where every loan, every small detail of our life together. I opened a fresh page and wrote, "Valerie, notebook entries, April 12th, patient, finances, stubborn. If she wanted to keep records, so would I, but mine would tell the truth." The next morning, Valerie breezed in, humming, apron tied neatly. She didn't notice the ledger on the table, but I did, and for the first time since she'd arrived, I felt a flicker of power. If she wanted a war of paper and pen, then she had chosen the wrong bookkeeper. It started with $20, a tiny alert from my bank app one Friday morning. Withdrawal, $20, 11:47 p.m. I frowned at the screen. I hadn't been awake at 11:47 p.m., let alone at an ATM. The next day, another. Withdrawal, $40, 10:33 p.m. Again, too late for me. Too odd. I printed the statements and circled the entries with my red pen. Old habits die hard. Every irregularity must be marked, every line explained. When Daniel came over Sunday afternoon, I slid the paper across the table. "Can you explain these?" He scanned it, shrugged.
"Probably just Val picking up some groceries. She mentioned the ATM card wasn't working for a while."
I stiffened. "Groceries? With my account?"
"Relax, Mom. It's small amounts. You'll drive yourself crazy worrying about every little thing."
Every little thing. To me, $20 wasn't just $20. It was the principle, the imbalance on the page. "I didn't authorize it," I said firmly. Daniel sighed, rubbed his forehead.
"She's helping you. Don't nitpick."
That night, I checked again. Another alert, this time $60. Not groceries, not by accident. A pattern. The next morning when Valerie arrived, I asked directly, "Were you at an ATM late last night?" Her eyes flicked, just for a second, then she smiled. Oh, Mrs. Hayes, you must have misread something. I never touch your money without asking. Without asking, but the statements didn't lie. Later, when she stepped outside to take a phone call, I noticed my purse had been moved from the chair to the counter, the zipper slightly open, my wallet angled differently. I touched the leather, a cold wave sliding through me. That evening, I called the bank. The woman on the line was polite, professional. Mrs. Hayes, the card was swiped at an ATM on Main Street. Does anyone else have access to your debit card? I swallowed hard. My caregiver sometimes uses it for groceries, but never that late, never without me knowing. Would you like us to freeze the card? I hesitated. Freezing the card meant explaining it to Daniel, and Daniel already thought I was paranoid. Not yet, I whispered. Just keep watching. The next day, Valerie arrived with fresh flowers. For you, Mrs. Hayes, a little cheer for the living room. She set them on the table, beaming. Her hands lingered on the vase. I forced a smile, but inside, my mind ticked like a metronome. Flowers in, dollars out. That night, I opened my ledger. April 18th, withdrawal $20, 11:47 p.m. April 19th, withdrawal $40, 10:33 p.m. April 20th, withdrawal $60, 9:55 p.m. I underlined them twice, and beneath I wrote in neat, angry script, pattern identified, unauthorized, Valerie present. I thought of Richard then, how he used to say, if the numbers don't add up, don't trust the story. And the numbers weren't adding up, not with my son, not with my caregiver, not with the life I thought I controlled. The next morning, Daniel called. Mom, Val mentioned you've been checking the bank every night. Maybe ease off, okay? You're stressing yourself. I clutched the phone tighter. I'm not stressing. I'm observing. There's a difference. He chuckled softly. You've always been too meticulous. Just let Val handle it. Let Val handle it. And just like that, the ground tilted further. As I hung up, my eyes fell on the flowers Valerie had brought. Bright yellow daisies, cheerful and harmless. But all I could think was how quickly they'd wilt, how easily beauty covered rot. It began with little things. A misplaced salt shaker. A missed TV program. A name I blanked on for a neighbor I hadn't seen in years. Normal lapses, harmless slips. But with Valerie and Daniel, each one became a headline. The first time it happened, I had left my checkbook on the coffee table. When I came back from the kitchen, it wasn't there. Valerie, did you see my checkbook? She smiled gently, almost pitying. You must have moved it yourself. I'll help you look. We searched for 10 minutes before she found it, tucked under the newspaper. See? You put it here. Her tone wasn't accusing. It was soft, sympathetic, the kind of voice you'd use for a child. That evening, Daniel called. Mom, Val told me you misplaced your checkbook. Everything okay? Heat rose in my chest. I didn't misplace it. She did. A pause. Mom, you probably just forgot. Don't be embarrassed. It happens. Forgot. Embarrassed. The words slotted neatly into Valerie's notebook. The second time it was the stove. I was sure I had turned the burner off after boiling pasta, but when Valerie came into the kitchen, she gasped dramatically. Oh no, Mrs. Hayes, you left this on. That's dangerous. I stared at the knob. It sat it off, but when she twisted it, it clicked once more, as though it had been slightly ajar. You really need to be more careful. Later that night, Daniel arrived unannounced. Val says you almost had a fire today. A fire, I snapped. It was off. He frowned. Mom, I know it's hard to admit. I slammed my cane against the floor. Hard to admit what? That I can still read a knob? His silence was worse than anger. I started to doubt myself. Had I left it on? Had I put the checkbook under the paper? Each moment of certainty crumbled under their voices. By the third week, Valerie had a new phrase. It's okay, Mrs. Hayes. You're just tired. Recovery is confusing. Confusing. Another word that didn't fit me, but fit her story.
One afternoon,
I caught her whispering in the hallway. Daniel's voice was low on speakerphone.
"She's slipping, isn't she?"
Valerie, yes, I'm worried.
She repeats herself constantly, and she gets angry when I point things out. Classic signs. Signs. Like a diagnosis. I pressed my ear to the doorframe, pulse thudding. Daniel sighed on the line. I knew it. Maybe we should start thinking ahead, for her safety. I stepped into the hall. Valerie snapped the phone shut, smile plastered on her face. "Oh, Mrs. Hayes, didn't hear you there." I forced my voice steady. "Talking about me?" She tilted her head, all innocence. "Just telling Daniel how well you're doing." That night I wrote in my ledger, May 3rd, checkbook moved, blamed me. May 6th, stove left on, contradicted me. May 9, phone call. Valerie tells Daniel I'm repeating myself. Each entry felt like a stone in a wall I was building against their lies. But the wall had cracks, because when I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, a question gnawed at me. What if they were right? What if I was slipping? And in that dark doubt, Valerie's notebook won a little ground. The next morning she poured my coffee and smiled with her endless patience. "Don't worry, Mrs. Hayes. I'm here to remember things for you." Her words were a balm. Her tone was soothing. And in that moment I almost believed her. The waiting room smelled of antiseptic and coffee that had been sitting too long. Magazines slumped on tables, their pages curled at the edges. I had been dreading this appointment. Routine, Valerie called it. "Just a checkup," she said with that same sugary smile. But in her notebook, I knew it meant something else. She sat beside me, legs crossed neatly, notebook peeking from her bag. Every so often she glanced at me, then at her watch, then back at me, as though measuring how much of me there was left to keep track of. When the nurse called my name, Valerie was on her feet before I was. "Come on, Mrs. Hayes, I'll walk with you." Her hand touched my elbow, firm. Too firm. I wanted to shrug it off, but the cane in the hip made me hesitate, so I let her guide me, as though I needed it. Dr. Patel smiled warmly when we entered. "Linda, good to see you again. How's the hip?" I answered before Valerie could open her mouth. "Healing fine. Slow, but steady." Dr. Patel nodded, but Valerie was already leaning in, lowering her voice. "Doctor, if I may, she's been a little forgetful lately, misplacing things, repeating questions." I froze. The words landed heavy in the room, souring the air. Dr. Patel glanced at me, then back at her. "Is that true, Linda?" My throat tightened. "I misplace things like anyone, but I am not confused." Valerie's hand fluttered like a dove between us. "I'm not saying it's serious, just little things. Normal for her age, of course. Normal for her age." I could hear the pen scratching in Dr. Patel's notes. Something inside me snapped. "Doctor, may I speak to you alone?" Valerie's smile stiffened. "Oh, I think it's best if I stay." "No." My voice came sharp, firmer than I'd expected. "Alone." For a moment, tension thickened the air. Valerie stood frozen, still smiling, still poised. Then she gave a little nod, as though she were the one granting permission, and slipped out of the room. The door shut behind her. Silence hummed. Dr. Patel tilted her head. "Linda, what's going on?" I exhaled slowly. "She's been taking notes. About me. Not medical notes. Accusations. She tells Daniel I'm forgetful. She says I'm confused. She's planting a story." Dr. Patel's pen paused. "Do you feel confused?" I met her eyes. "No, I feel watched." For a long moment she studied me. Then she set the pen down. "Linda, I've known you for years. You're sharp. Nothing in your history suggests cognitive decline. But if she's documenting otherwise, we need to be cautious." Relief swelled, but so did fear. "You believe me?" I believe you, but stories like hers can gain weight if repeated, especially if they reach legal ears. When Valerie returned, she plastered her smile back on. Everything all right? Dr. Patel smiled politely. Yes, fine. I'll schedule a follow-up in 3 months. Linda, keep doing your exercises. Her tone was neutral, unreadable, but I caught the flick of her eyes toward me, a silent warning. On the drive home, Valerie hummed as usual. I'm glad we went. Doctors need the full picture, don't they? I stared out the window at the passing houses. Whose picture, Valerie? Yours or mine? Her humming faltered just for a second, then picked up again. That night I opened my ledger. May 14th, Dr. Patel appointment. Valerie whispered, forgetful, repeats, misplaces. Doctor noted. I requested privacy. Confirmed, no decline. Warning, story may gain weight if repeated. I closed the book with trembling fingers. For the first time, I realized Valerie wasn't just keeping notes. She was trying to make them permanent. It was a rainy Thursday when I noticed the desk drawers. The bottom one, where I kept my checkbook, my deed, Richard's will, wasn't shut all the way. A small crack, just enough to catch my eye. I pulled it open. Empty. My heart dropped. The neat folders, the labeled envelopes, the stack of check registers, all gone. I rifled through the other drawers, frantic, cane clattering against the wood. Nothing. The air felt thin, as if the house itself had been hollowed out. When Valerie arrived that afternoon, umbrella dripping, humming as always, I was waiting in the living room. The folder of missing documents echoed in my mind like a phantom limb. Valerie, I said evenly, did you move something from my desk? Her eyes flicked, just for a second. Then she smiled, unbothered. Oh, yes, I put those in a safer place. Too important to leave lying around. Too important. My voice sharpened. Those were private. Her tone softened, practiced pity. I know, but Daniel worries. What if you misplace something? What if you forget? We can't risk losing such important papers. Forget. There it was again. Where are they? She leaned on the doorway, arms crossed casually. Don't worry, I'm keeping them secure. The words curdled in my stomach. Not secure. Not safe. Stolen. I gripped my cane so tightly my knuckles whitened. I want them back. Now. Her smile faltered for half a breath, then snapped back. Of course, Mrs. Hayes. I'll bring them tomorrow. No need to get upset. But tomorrow came, and nothing returned. When I asked again, she brushed it aside with her practiced sweetness. I forgot them at home. Don't worry, I'll bring them soon. Forgot. The lie folded neatly into her narrative, a word meant to sting. That evening, Daniel dropped by. I wasted no time. Daniel, she's taken my documents, the deed, the checkbook, everything. I want them back. He sighed, setting his phone down like a judge preparing a sentence. Mom, Val told me she moved them. It's for your protection. My chest burned. My protection? From what? From myself? His gaze was steady, infuriatingly calm. From mistakes. You don't want to misplace something important. I slammed my ledger on the table, pages fluttering. I don't misplace. I don't forget. I document, always. He flinched at the force in my voice but recovered quickly. Mom, you're making this harder than it needs to be. Then softer, as if soothing a child, you should be grateful. After he left, silence pressed against the walls. I sat at my desk staring at the empty drawer. Richard's will had lain there for 10 years, untouched. Our house deed carefully protected. My ledger of old accounts gone. And in their place, only the word forgetful written in someone else's notebook. That night I opened my own ledger and wrote with steady hand. May 19th. Deed, checkbook, will missing. Valerie admits she moved them, refuses return. Daniel, I underlined stolen 3 times. As I closed the book, thunder cracked outside. I whispered into the dark room. If they think they can lock me away from my own life, they've underestimated me. The words hung there, quiet but certain, and for the first time, I began to think of Valerie not as a helper, but as an intruder who had already picked the lock. Dr. Patel's office was brighter this time, the spring sun pouring through wide windows. Valerie walked beside me, notebook peeking from her bag like always, humming as though we were heading to a picnic instead of a checkup. She spoke softly as we entered. Remember, Mrs. Hayes, don't get nervous if the doctor asks about memory. Just answer honestly. Her hand patted my arm, warm, firm, a warning disguised as kindness. Inside the exam room, Dr. Patel checked my hip, asked questions, smiled. Valerie sat in the corner, notebook open, pen poised. Every cough, every pause, every slip of phrase captured. I could almost hear the scratch of her pen louder than the doctor's voice. After the exam, Dr. Patel excused herself to write prescriptions. Valerie followed, chattering about medication schedules, leaving me alone with the nurse who'd been taking vitals. She was a young woman, sharp eyes, steady hands. When the door shut, she leaned closer, lowering her voice. Mrs. Hayes, may I ask you something? I blinked. Of course. She hesitated, then whispered, Do you trust your caregiver? My pulse thudded. Why do you ask? She glanced at the door. I've seen her kind before. All overly involved, always speaking for the patient, keeping notes that don't match what I observe. Sometimes, it's not about care. It's about control. Her words cut through me like a blade. Control? She nodded slowly. Be careful. If you feel uncomfortable, talk to your doctor privately or ask for a patient advocate. For the first time in weeks, the fog of doubt Thank you, I whispered. The nurse touched my arm gently. You're sharper than she makes you out to be. I can tell. When Valerie returned, smile as polished as ever, the nurse straightened and said nothing. Her mask slipped back into place, professional, unreadable. But I carried her warning like a talisman. On the ride home, Valerie chattered about groceries, about Daniel, about how forgetfulness is normal. I nodded at the right times, but inside, the nurse's words echoed. Overly involved. Not about care, about control. That evening, I opened my ledger. May 23rd, clinic visit. Nurse, name, Sarah. Badge seen. Whispered warning. Said, be careful. Seen this before. Not about care, about control. Confirmed outside validation. I underlined outside validation twice. For weeks I had felt like a ghost in my own house, unheard, dismissed. Now I had proof. Someone else could see through the mask. When Daniel called that night, I almost told him. Almost. But I remembered the way he had sided with Valerie about the stove, the documents, the withdrawals. He believed her story more than mine, so I kept the nurse's warning to myself. For now. Later, as Valerie locked the back door and hummed her way upstairs to fetch laundry, I whispered to the empty room, "I'm not crazy. I'm not slipping. I'm right." The words felt like armor, and for the first time in weeks, I slept without waking at every sound. I had spent my life balancing columns. Every dollar earned, every cent spent. Numbers don't lie. That was my creed as a bookkeeper. So if Valerie wanted to build a record of me, then I would build one of her. It started small. Dates, times, little notes. May 24th, $30 withdrawal, 9:12 p.m. Not me. Valerie present that evening. May 25th, stove accusation. Knob was at off. Contradicted me. Daniel repeated later. Line by line I wrote. Not excuses, not emotions, just facts. Soon my ledger grew thick with entries. Every careless comment, every forgetful she dropped into Daniel's ear, every time something moved from where I had placed it. May 28th. Valerie noted I was tired. I had slept 7 hours, normal. Exaggeration. May 30th. She forgot to return documents. Third reminder ignored. I became sharper, more alert. When she tried to slip a word into conversation, I logged it. When she hummed while cooking, I noted the time, the duration, the sudden silences. It wasn't paranoia, it was accounting. My life, line by line, reconciled on the page. But the most damning entries were financial. The withdrawals kept coming. Small at first, 20s, 40s, 60s. Then one night, $120, 11:04 p.m. I circled it in red. 3 digits, a leap. When Daniel came the next day, I slid the statement toward him. Look, this isn't groceries. This is theft. He skimmed it, frowning. Mom, maybe you just forgot you withdrew it. The words sliced me. Forgot. I've tracked every cent since I was 19. I didn't forget. But his face said it all. He believed her notebook more than my ledger. That night I stared at the ceiling, fists clenched. For a moment despair threatened to drown me, but then I rolled over, opened my ledger, and wrote across a fresh page. June 1st. Daniel dismisses evidence, chooses her notes over mine, must build undeniable proof. So I grew meticulous. Receipts taped into margins, bank alerts printed and stapled, even small observations logged with precision. June 3rd. Valerie whispers on phone. Heard words, doctor, capacity, legal. June 4th. She replaced my coffee with herbal tea again. Notes, better for her memory. A pattern emerged. Health, money, documents. 3 prongs of the same attack. By the second week of June, I had a full binder, not just a ledger. Paper stacked, organized, cross-referenced. Every lie, every theft, every insult disguised as care. Valerie thought she was documenting decline, but I was scribbling away. I caught her eye. I held my ledger in my lap, closed but heavy. I smiled. She smiled back, uneasy. In that silence, I knew she sensed it. That I wasn't drifting into confusion. That I was watching, recording, building. When she left that night, I opened my ledger once more. Across the top of a fresh page, I wrote, Counterfile complete. Awaiting opportunity. and beneath it a single sentence: "She doesn't know the numbers are against her." The papers came on a Tuesday. Valerie arrived earlier than usual, carrying a slim leather folder instead of groceries. Daniel followed close behind, his jaw tight, his smile forced. They moved with a strange coordination, as though rehearsed. And in a way, they had been rehearsing for weeks. We sat at the dining table, the same table where Richard and I had once balanced our checkbooks together, every column aligned. Now it was spread with documents I hadn't requested, prepared by hands I didn't trust. Daniel cleared his throat. "Mom, we've been talking. We think it's time to make things official." Valerie slid the folder open. Crisp papers, small X's marked in neat blue ink. "Just some protections," she said sweetly. "Power of attorney, medical directives. Nothing complicated." Her pen gleamed on the table between us. I forced my hand to tremble slightly as I lifted the first page. Small print, dense paragraphs, familiar traps. But I didn't need to read it. Claire, the elder rights lawyer I'd quietly contacted, had already warned me. Buried clauses, property transfers disguised as medical authorizations, classic fraud. Daniel leaned closer, voice tender but urgent. "It's just precaution, Mom. If something happens, Val and I can handle things for you." I looked up, meeting his eyes. "And what if nothing happens?" His mouth opened, then shut. Valerie stepped in smoothly. "Then nothing changes. But you'll have peace of mind." Peace of mind. The price of my freedom. I set the paper down, feigning confusion.
I don't really understand all this. Could you explain it again? Valerie's smile flickered, annoyance peeking through, before smoothing back into place. "Of course. This one just lets us help you with money. That one's for medical decisions, standard stuff." I nodded slowly, pretending to absorb. But beneath the table, I pressed the button on the small recorder hidden in my pocket. Daniel pushed the pen closer. "Mom, it's really simple. Sign here, initial there." My hand hovered. I let silence stretch, tension tightening the room. Then I whispered, "What if I make a mistake?" Valerie leaned forward, voice syrupy. "Then we'll fix it for you. That's what family does." Family. The word landed heavy, not like love, but like chains. I set the pen down deliberately. "I think I'll wait. Maybe tomorrow." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Mom, it has to be today. The lawyer is waiting for us to bring this back signed." His tone cracked, harsher now. I looked between them, my expression soft, uncertain. Inside, my pulse hammered, but I kept my voice steady. "I need time. Just one night." Valerie's smile faltered again, then snapped back. "Of course, Mrs. Hayes. Tomorrow, then." When they left, folder tucked tightly under Valerie's arm, I sat at the empty table and exhaled. The silence was sharp, almost electric. But it wasn't despair that filled me this time. It was certainty. I opened my ledger, turned to a fresh page. June 10th, papers presented. Power of attorney, medical directives. Pressured for signature. Recorder active. Refused to sign. Gave deadline. Tomorrow. I underlined recorder active twice. Tomorrow would be the breaking point. For weeks they had been writing their story of me. Tomorrow I would make sure it became mine. The next morning I set the stage. I brewed coffee, warmed a plate of muffins, and laid them out on the dining table. A domestic scene, harmless, inviting. In my pocket the recorder was already humming.
a tiny witness tucked close to my heartbeat. The cameras, newly hidden with the help of Claire's investigator, blinked silently from corners they'd never notice. Valerie arrived first, cheerful as always. She carried the folder like a priest with a holy book. Daniel followed, minutes later, his eyes sharp, movements restless. They didn't comment on the muffins. They didn't comment on the coffee. They only saw the papers. "Mom," Daniel said, forcing warmth into his voice. "Today's the day." He set the folder in front of me, opening it with practiced care. Valerie placed the pen beside it, her smile polished to a perfect shine. "Let's make this easy, Mrs. Hayes. Just sign here, here, and here." I tilted my head, feigning confusion. "I tried reading last night, but it's all so complicated." Daniel sighed, too loudly. "Mom, it's not complicated. You're making it complicated." Valerie's hand brushed his arm, calming him. "Don't worry, Daniel. She just needs reassurance." Then, to me, "Trust us, dear. We know what's best." I let the silence stretch. Then softly, I asked, "And what exactly happens once I sign?" Valerie's eyes flickered. For a heartbeat, her smile cracked. Daniel jumped in. "It just makes things smoother, Mom. Bills, insurance, doctor's visits. Val and I can take care of everything." "Even the house?" I pressed. His gaze sharpened. "Yes, if needed, to protect you." The pen lay heavy in my hand. I tapped it against the paper, deliberately. "And if I don't sign?" The temperature in the room shifted. Daniel's jaw tightened. "Mom, stop playing games. We've spent months helping you, paying your extras, driving you to doctors. Do you think we'll keep doing that if you don't cooperate?" His voice trembled with anger, barely leashed. Valerie leaned in, her tone low, coaxing. "Marilyn, be reasonable. We've put so much effort into your care, but without legal authority, we can't keep supporting you. Do you want to end up alone, struggling, depending on strangers?" Her words were velvet wrapped around knives. I lowered my eyes, letting my shoulders slump. "I don't want to be a burden." Daniel seized the opening. "Then don't be. Sign. It's the simplest way to keep everything safe." I lifted the pen again. My hand hovered above the first X. The room held its breath. Then I asked quietly, "What if I told you, I think this isn't about protecting me? What if I think it's about protecting yourselves?" Their faces froze. Valerie blinked, then laughed too quickly. "Oh, Marilyn, you're imagining things again." But Daniel's mask slipped. "So what if it is?" he snapped. "You think you can handle all this forever? You'll slip up. You'll forget something. And then what? Better for us to manage it now." His honesty was raw, unpolished, and damning. I placed the pen down. "So this is about my house, my savings, everything Richard and I built." Valerie's smile was gone now. "Why shouldn't it be? You won't need it all. Daniel has a family to think of. We've earned this." The recorder caught every word. The cameras caught every expression. I folded my hands neatly on the table and whispered, almost kindly, "Thank you." Daniel frowned. "For what?" I met his eyes, steady now. "For finally telling the truth." The silence was thunderous. Valerie stiffened, realization dawning too late. Daniel's mouth opened, but no words came. The web they had spun for months had finally tightened. Around them. The silence after my words hung heavy, like thunder waiting to break. Daniel's jaw worked, but nothing came. Valerie sat back slowly, her smile gone, eyes cold as steel. I folded my hands neatly, letting the moment stretch. Then I said it plainly. I know everything. The withdrawals, the documents, the notebook. And now this, your own words. Valerie's laugh was brittle. No one will believe you. An old woman making accusations against her son and his wife. Her voice dripped with scorn. I reached into my pocket and set the small recorder on the table. Its red light blinked.
They won't have to believe me. They'll believe this. Daniel lunged for it, but before his hand reached, the front door opened. Claire, my lawyer, stepped in. Behind her came Detective Morales, calm and deliberate. Their arrival was no accident. We had arranged it for today, this moment. Daniel Hayes, Valerie Turner, the detective said evenly. We need to have a word. Valerie stood, chair scraping hard against the floor. This is ridiculous. She's confused. She doesn't know what she's saying. Claire's voice cut through like glass. On the contrary, Mrs. Hayes has provided us with weeks of detailed records. Bank statements, receipts, her ledger. And now, she gestured to the recorder. A full confession in your own words. Daniel's face flushed red. She's manipulating you. She's always been controlling. Detective Morales raised a hand. Save it. You'll have your chance to speak downtown. Valerie tried one last time, her voice sharp and desperate. This is her word against ours. She's old, forgetful. Half the time she doesn't know what day it is. I stood then, cane steady, voice clear. Today is Tuesday, June 11th, and I've never been sharper in my life. The detective read them their rights. Daniel's hands were cuffed behind him, Valerie's too, though she hissed protests all the way to the door. As they were let out, Daniel turned, eyes blazing with betrayal. You'll regret this, Mom. You'll die alone. I held his gaze. Better alone than in chains of your making. When the door shut behind them, the house fell quiet. Not the suffocating quiet of weeks past, filled with suspicion and fear. This silence was clean, like the first breath after a storm. Claire touched my arm gently. You did everything right, Mrs. Hayes. Your ledger, your recordings, they'll hold up in court. You've built an airtight case. I nodded, suddenly weary. I just wanted my life back, my home, my dignity. Her eyes softened. And now you have them. That note. Sex 0.05 ledger open. For the first time in weeks, I didn't write about Valerie or Daniel. Instead, I wrote one simple line across the fresh page. June 11th, free. The empty drawer where my deed once lay would soon be filled again, safely, properly. The notebook Valerie used to weaponize my life was now sealed in an evidence bag. And me? I wasn't a patient. I wasn't confused. I was Linda Hayes, bookkeeper, widow, mother, and survivor. 3 months later, the trial ended with guilty pleas. Valerie and Daniel avoided the full weight of prison by agreeing to restitution, mandatory programs, and most importantly, a lifetime restraining order. I watched them from the back of the courtroom. Daniel wouldn't meet my eyes. Valerie glared as though I had stolen her life. But when the gavel fell, I felt only peace. Now, in my quiet house, I make coffee in the mornings, humming my own tune. The ledger sits open, still neat, still precise. Only now the lines record birthdays, calls with old friends, books I want to read. Not battles, not betrayals. One evening I sat on the porch, golden light spilling over the garden.
For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel watched, judged, or erased. I whispered into the evening air, a vow only I needed to hear. They thought they could write my story, but I've always been the one holding the pen.